I actually want to acknowledge two homeowners who are going to be here. Ramona, I was in your house. We had a great time in West River. It's a great, great space, every good thing. Well, I mean, it's the same thing to you, too. And to say something about neighborhood housing services and also just about how I think about things right now. You know, when I got to know neighborhood housing services, I thought, God, it was just so cool. You know, they were taking these houses, they weren't so great, and they were turning them into great spaces. And it reminded me of something else, and how I started thinking about changing things is when we started building schools 20 years ago. I thought, oh, that's great. The schools, they were leaked, they were ugly, blah, blah, blah. But you get to a point and you realize it's not about the buildings. You know, it really isn't about the buildings. It's about the people. It's about the people inside the buildings. And I think going back, and I figured this out, this is true. If you take everybody under 20 years of age in New Haven today, add to it the people who have moved in, over half the city was not here when I got sworn into office, which means I've either really been around too long, or people have been extremely fertile in birth rates around here. But going back to that New Haven of 1993, I just remember if you had gone in the neighborhoods with the vacant structures, you wanted to do the buildings. If you had walked through the schools, you had wanted to do the buildings. And Lord knows if you had walked down Church Street with all the blocks and Temple Street and College Street, it was grim, like a lot of places. And so I want to say this about the people. I think neighborhood housing services not only gets the buildings, but through what they do, frankly, with the homeownership counseling, what they do with foreclosure counseling, it's really dealing with people, where they are in their lives, their skills, how they think about ownership, and how they think about responsibility to themselves, their family, and their neighborhood. And that's what I like about neighborhood housing services, is it walks and talks at the same time, which is to say it thinks about the buildings, but it thinks about the buildings and people inside the buildings. And I think there are lessons for all of us, at least for the city. When I think about things that I feel very fond of over the last 5 years, the city's position on immigration reform, and the city's position about school reform, it's been about investment in people. And I think there are lots of other opportunities to do that. I wouldn't say to Jim, because I know housing services, I think the time for things like the Yale Home Buyers Program has passed. And I know it's benefited a lot of people, but in a lot of ways it's investing still yet in people, I think, in buildings a lot of ways. And when I think about violence, as I have the last 2 days, I feel that we can do so much more to invest particularly in young people who in school are showing the early markers of behavior that's going to become violent later on. So I'm saying as we acknowledge neighborhood housing services, it's great work, and as we think about what's important to do in the future, it's not the place, it's the people. Whether it's kids in our school, making sure they have the skills and talent to succeed in college, which is what our economy demands today, or whether it's young people who've been exposed to violence, experienced violence, and think about how we support them so we're not imprisoning them 20 years or 10 years from now, whether it's how we think about financial literacy and support people about thinking about things like home ownership. I think those are going to be the really smart efforts for New Haven. Everything else is so 1994. And it isn't 1994 anymore. It's good to be here. Thank you for all you guys do.